Welcome back to TESS'S Cryptids. This time, we're going to the Scottish Highlands to explore the legend of the Loch Ness Monster.
Nessie.
You know, Nessie. It's a story that has captivated people for generations.
Right.
But is there any truth to it, or is it all just a load of, well, Loch Ness?
It's a story that has certainly sparked a lot of debate. And what's interesting to me is how deeply intertwined this legend is with Scottish history and culture.
You're right.
It's not just a monster story, it's become a symbol of that region's mystique and a major draw for tourism.
Right. People travel from all over the world hoping to catch a glimpse of Nessie.
But before we jump into all the evidence, I think it's important to understand how this legend first took root.
Yeah.
Where do we even begin?
Well, the earliest written account dates back to the 6th century.
Wow.
A story about St. Columba, an Irish monk who supposedly encountered a water beast attacking a man in the River Ness.
Oh, okay.
Columba intervened, rebuked the creature, and saved the day. Okay, so we're talking about a pretty old tale. But is this really the origin of the Loch Ness Monster legend? I mean, the River Ness isn't actually the loch itself, right?
That's true. They are technically different bodies of water. However, the River Ness flows directly out of Loch Ness, so there's definitely a geographical connection.
Right.
Whether this specific story is the actual root of the legend is debatable.
Okay.
Some view it as the foundation, while others see it as just another water beast tale common in medieval times.
So maybe a way to make St. Columba seem even more impressive, like a PR stunt for early Christianity.
Possibly. But even if we set aside, St. Columba Celtic mythology is full of stories about water beasts and other mythical creatures.
Sure.
So the region already had a rich tradition of these kinds of tales long before the Loch Ness Monster became a global phenomenon.
That makes sense. It's like the perfect breeding ground for a legend like this. But we had some sightings before Nessie hit the big time in the 1930s, right?
Absolutely. There were a few reported sightings in the 19th century that added to the local lore.
Wow.
For example, in 1871 or 1872, a man named D. Mackenzie saw something churning the water. And in 1888, Alexander MacDonald claimed to have encountered a stubby-legged animal near the loch.
Stubby-legged, that doesn't exactly fit the image of the long-necked Nessie we usually see.
Exactly, and that's a point worth highlighting. Descriptions of the creature have varied wildly over the years, which unfortunately makes it even harder to separate fact from fiction.
So if people were already spotting strange things in Loch Ness, what was it that catapulted the monster into international fame?
The year 1933 was a turning point.
Okay.
A couple named Aldi and John Mackay reported seeing a massive creature rolling and plunging in the water.
Wow.
This sighting, along with Alex Campbell's article in the Inverness Courier, really ignited what you might call modern Nessie mania.
And it was Campbell's article that first used the term monster, wasn't it?
That's often claimed, though some say the term was actually coined by the paper's editor, Evan Barron. Regardless of who said it first, using the word monster definitely caught the public's attention and shaped how the creature was perceived.
It's amazing how one word can change the whole narrative.
Yeah.
So what other 1933 sighting stands out?
Well, there's George Spicer's encounter.
Okay.
He claimed to have seen a creature crossing the road, and he described it as having a long, wavy neck, comparing it to a dragon or prehistoric animal.
Ah, so that's where the whole plesiosaur idea comes from.
Precisely.
Got it.
Spicer's account really solidified that image in the public imagination.
Okay.
It also contributed to the widespread adoption of the name Loch Ness Monster.
So we've got centuries-old folklore, a handful of intriguing sightings, and then boom. Nessie becomes a global sensation in 1933. But what really cemented the legend were those infamous photographs, right? Those grainy images that sparked countless conspiracy theories.
You're absolutely right. And no conversation about the Loch Ness Monster is complete without talking about the photos, especially the surgeon's photograph from 1934.
Oh, yes, the classic image of a head and neck emerging from the water.
Yeah. Right?
That photo became the face of Nessie for decades.
It did, but there's a twist.
Oh,
It turned out to be a hoax.
Oh, no.
The monster in the picture was actually a toy submarine.
A toy submarine. Seriously.
It's a pretty wild story. A man named M.A. Wetherill was involved.
Okay.
He'd been publicly humiliated by the Daily Mail when they debunked his earlier Nessie footprint discovery, which was actually a hippopotamus foot umbrella stand. So seeking revenge, he, along with his son and son-in-law, crafted this elaborate Nessie model and staged the whole photograph.
That's quite a scheme. But if the most famous photo is fake, what does that mean for all the other photos out there? Does it make you question everything?
It definitely raises some red flags.
Yeah.
We have Hugh Gray's blurry photo from 1933, which might just be his dog fetching a stick.
Oh.
There's Arthur Grant's sketch, which some say looks more like an otter.
Oh.
And let's not forget the 1938 Taylor film, which was later analyzed and determined to likely be a floating object.
So a lot of potential for mistaken identity. It seems like Nessie is a master of disguise. But what about the more scientific evidence, like sonar readings? Surely those offer something more concrete, right?
Well, sonar technology has certainly played a significant role in the search for Nessie.
Okay.
One of the earliest intriguing sonar readings dates back to 1954 from a fishing boat called the Rival 3.
Oh.
They detected a large object that seemed to be keeping pace with their vessel.
Okay, now that sounds promising.
Right. There was also the 1960 Dinsdale film, which initially seemed compelling but was later reinterpreted as possibly just a boat.
Okay.
Then we have Operation Deep Scan in 1987, which was the largest sonar search ever conducted in Loch Ness. It did detect a large moving object.
Wow.
But even then, researchers offered alternative explanations suggesting it could have been debris or a group of seals.
So even with sonar, it's not a slam dunk for Nessie. It's frustrating how every time we seem to get close, there's another explanation.
It can be frustrating for sure. In fact, a BBC-sponsored sonar search in 2003 found no evidence of a large creature, leading some scientists to declare Nessie a myth.
Really?
And just to add a touch of irony, a 2016 sonar survey discovered a lost movie prop, a Nessie model from the film The Private Life of Sherlock Holmes.
Oh, the irony. We're looking for a real monster, and we keep finding fake ones. But before we completely dismiss the possibility of Nessie's existence, we have to talk about the 2018 DNA survey. That sounds pretty definitive, wouldn't you say?
It was certainly a comprehensive study. They analyzed water samples from Loch Ness to identify the species present, and the results were quite surprising.
Were they? What did they find?
They found no evidence of large fish, reptiles, or marine mammals. However, there was an abundance of one thing: eel DNA.
Wait a minute. So are you saying Nessie is just a giant eel? That's a bit of a letdown.
It's one of the leading theories right now. While no giant eels have actually been caught in Loch Ness, the sheer volume of eel DNA suggests there could be some unusually large ones lurking down there.
Well, that's a twist.
Yeah.
We've gone from plesiosaurs to giant eels.
No.
It seems like the mystery of the Loch Ness Monster continues.
It's fascinating how a creature with such limited evidence can generate so much passion and debate. It's almost as if Nessie has transcended zoology and become something more,
Cultural.
culture. Yeah. Nessie's a pop culture icon. She's been featured in movies and books, TV shows, even video games. You don't see that happening with, say, a giant catfish.
You don't.
Precisely, the Loch Ness Monster has become a symbol of mystery, a reminder that we haven't completely mapped and categorized our world.
Right.
There are still unknowns out there, places where imagination can run wild.
And let's not forget the impact Nessie has had on Scotland itself. She's a huge tourism draw, bringing people from all corners of the globe to Loch Ness, hoping to catch a glimpse of the elusive creature.
Right.
That's a big boost to the local economy.
Absolutely. It's a prime example of how a legend, even one without concrete proof, can have a tangible impact on a region. And speaking of belief, there are plenty of people who firmly believe in Nessie's existence.
Right.
So what are their arguments besides the occasional blurry photo or sonar blip?
I'm curious about that, too. What keeps the Nessie believers going?
Well, some point to the sheer number of eyewitness accounts over the years. They argue that while some sightings might be misidentifications or hoaxes, the sheer volume of reports suggests something unusual must be happening in Loch Ness.
It's like the saying, where there's smoke, there's fire. Though in this case, it might be more like, where there are hundreds of blurry photos, there might be a monster.
Something like that. Pro-Nessie folks also argue that the loch's environment itself could potentially support a large unknown creature. Loch Ness is deep dark and has connections to the seas, so it's not entirely implausible that a creature could find its way in and remain undetected.
I see what you mean. And, we haven't discovered every single species on Earth, right? There's always the possibility of new and surprising creatures lurking in the depths waiting to be found.
Exactly. There's a certain allure to the idea that we haven't mapped every inch of our planet, that there's still room for the unexpected. But of course, we also have the skeptics. What are their main arguments against Nessie's existence?
Okay, let's hear the other side of the story. Why are so many people convinced Nessie is just a myth?
The biggest issue for the skeptics is the lack of hard evidence, despite decades of searching. We still don't have a clear photograph, a skeletal remain, or any irrefutable proof that a large unknown creature lives in Loch Ness.
That's a good point. It does seem odd that in our age of high-definition cameras and sophisticated tracking technology, Nessie has managed to remain so elusive.
Right. Skeptics also point out that many sightings can be explained by misidentifications of known animals, otters, birds, deer swimming in the loch, even boat wakes or unusual wave patterns. All of these could be mistaken for a monster, especially if someone is already primed to see one.
So our own expectations can sometimes play tricks on us. We see what we want to see.
That's certainly a possibility. Our perception can be influenced by expectations, leading us to interpret ambiguous information in a way that confirms our beliefs. And when it comes to something as legendary as the Loch Ness Monster, those expectations can be pretty strong.
Speaking of expectations, let's talk about the plesiosaur theory. It's a popular one, but isn't it a bit far-fetched? I mean, plesiosaurs were marine reptiles, and Loch Ness is a freshwater lake.
Most scientists would agree with you there. Plesiosaurs went extinct millions of years ago, and Loch Ness is a relatively young lake. Geologically speaking, it's unlikely a population of plesiosaurs could have survived there unnoticed for so long. Plus, a freshwater lake lacks the salinity and food sources a marine reptile like a plesiosaur would need to thrive.
That makes sense. And besides, don't plesiosaurs need to surface to breathe? You'd think with all the supposed sightings, someone would have snapped a clear photo of Nessie coming up for air by now.
Exactly, and the food chain in Loch Ness isn't really robust enough to support a large air-breathing reptile, like that the ecosystem just doesn't add up.
All right, so plesiosaurs are out. What about those giant eels we were talking about earlier? Isn't that the current leading theory?
It is. Remember that 2018 DNA survey we discussed, the one that found a significant amount of eel DNA in Loch Ness? That's what has many scientists thinking that Nessie, if it exists at all, is probably just a very large eel.
I see. So it's less monster from the deep and more unusually big fish?
That seems to be the most plausible explanation at this point.
But even if Nessie turns out to be a giant eel, it doesn't completely explain the legend, does it? There are still some unanswered questions.
That's true. For example, we still haven't found any giant eel specimens in Loch Ness. It makes you wonder, how could such large eels grow there, and why haven't we seen one? It's a bit of a puzzle.
It is. And, maybe there are other explanations we haven't even considered yet.
That's always a possibility. That's what makes this whole thing so intriguing, the mystery indoors.
And sometimes the search for answers can be just as fascinating as the answers themselves.
I completely agree. We may not have a definitive answer to the question of Nessie's existence, but we've learned so much about the history of the legend, the science of Loch Ness, and the enduring human fascination with the unknown.
Absolutely. But before we wrap up our deep dive into the Loch Ness Monster, I have to ask, what are some of the stranger, more outlandish theories out there? The ones that go beyond mistaken identities or hoaxes?
Well, if we're talking about speculation, there are some truly wild ideas that have been proposed over the years. Some people still cling to the idea that Nessie could be a surviving plesiosaur, somehow defying the odds and thriving in a freshwater environment.
That's pretty hard to believe, given what we just talked about.
Right. Others have suggested Nessie could be a long-necked giant amphibian, or even, and this one's a bit out there, a massive invertebrate, like a giant bristleworm.
A giant worm. Now, that's both terrifying and fascinating, but how would a worm explain those classic long neck and hump sightings?
Some have theorized that the neck could actually be a misinterpretation of the worm's extended body, while the humps might be caused by its segmented form moving through the water.
Okay, I can kind of see that, but I imagine that's a pretty fringe theory.
Definitely, it's highly speculative and not widely accepted by the scientific community, but when it comes to Nessie, people's imaginations run wild.
That's true. And speaking of wild ideas, what about the theories that go beyond the realm of zoology altogether? The more paranormal explanations.
Ah, yes, now we're entering the realm of the supernatural. Some believe Nessie could be a type of water spirit or maybe a manifestation of ancient Celtic folklore. There are even theories about underwater caves or get this interdimensional portals with Nessie popping in and out of our reality.
Whoa. Interdimensional portals. Now that's taking things to a whole new level.
Yeah.
It's amazing how one legend can spark such a wide range of explanations.
It really is. It speaks to the power of human imagination. We have this innate drive to explain the unknown, to fill in the gaps in our knowledge, even if it means venturing into the fantastical.
And I think the lack of concrete evidence surrounding Nessie actually allows those fantastical explanations to flourish. Everyone can project their own beliefs and theories onto the mystery.
That's a key point. The enduring allure of the Loch Ness Monster lies in its ambiguity. It's a blank canvas onto which we can paint our own interpretations.
So after all this discussion, Where do we stand on the question of Nessie's existence? Are we any closer to solving the mystery?
The evidence unfortunately remains inconclusive. While some sightings and sonar readings are intriguing, none of them offer the definitive proof needed to convince the scientific community. The most likely explanations, as we've discussed, point to misidentifications, hoaxes, or perhaps unusually large eels.
But you're not completely ruling out the possibility of something truly extraordinary lurking in Loch Ness, are you?
I wouldn't want to completely discount the unknown. After all, our planet still holds many secrets. But based on the evidence we have now, the existence of a large unknown creature in Loch Ness is highly improbable.
So what does this all mean for the legend of Nessie? Is it destined to fade away as science provides more rational explanations?
I doubt it. Legends have a way of persisting even in the face of skepticism. The Loch Ness Monster has become so deeply embedded in Scottish culture and the global imagination. It's a story that will continue to be told, debated, and reinterpreted for generations to come.
It's a good reminder that sometimes the mystery itself is more captivating than the answer.
Exactly. The search for Nessie may not have yielded a monster, but it has given us a fascinating glimpse into human curiosity and our enduring fascination with the unknown.
I love that. Well, it looks like we're just about out of time for this episode.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you'd like to add before we wrap things up?
Just this, who knows, maybe someday technology will advance to a point where we can finally unlock the secrets of Loch Ness and get a definitive answer to the age-old question, does Nessie truly exist?
Until then, the legend lives on. And that's it for this episode of TESS'S Cryptids. We'll be back soon with another dive into the world of mysterious creatures. So stay curious, keep exploring, and remember, there's always a chance that something extraordinary might be lurking just around the corner. So we've explored the history of the Loch Ness Monster and delved into those intriguing sightings and even pondered the possibility of giant eels. Right. But I have to admit, there's a part of me that still wants to believe in something truly extraordinary.
I understand that completely. It's hard to resist the allure of a good mystery,
Sure.
especially one as iconic as Nessie. And while we've focused on the more plausible explanations,
Right.
it's worth acknowledging that the lack of definitive proof allows for some pretty wild theories to circulate.
You telling me we touched on a few of those, like the giant worm idea?
Mhm.
But what are some of the other theories that have been floated around over the years, the ones that really push the boundaries of imagination?
Well, there's a theory that Nessie is a type of long-necked turtle, a species unknown to science. This idea attempts to reconcile the long neck sightings with a creature that could plausibly inhabit a freshwater environment. However, there's no evidence to support the existence of such a turtle, and the size and behavior described for Nessie wouldn't align with typical turtle characteristics.
So probably not a giant turtle then. What else have people come up with?
Some have proposed that Nessie could be a giant amphibian, perhaps a descendant of prehistoric amphibians that grew to enormous sizes in the isolated environment of Loch Ness. While intriguing, this theory runs into similar problems as the plesiosaur idea. The lake's ecosystem wouldn't support such a large amphibian, and there's no fossil evidence to suggest their presence in the region.
Okay, so we've got unlikely turtles and oversized amphibians. Anything else?
We can't forget the more paranormal theories. Some believe Nessie is a supernatural entity, perhaps a Celtic water spirit or creature with ties to ancient folklore.
Right.
These theories often draw on the rich mythology and folklore of the Scottish Highlands, suggesting that Nessie is more than just flesh and blood, but a being of legend and magic.
That's certainly a more mystical take on the Nessie legend.
It is, and for some, the idea of a supernatural Nessie is more compelling than any scientific explanation. It taps into our sense of wonder and the possibility that there are forces at work beyond our understanding.
I get that sometimes the rational explanations just aren't as exciting.
Exactly. And who knows, maybe there's a grain of truth hidden within those ancient tales and legends. Maybe Nessie is something that science simply can't explain.
Ooh, that's spooky. But ultimately, I think we have to rely on the evidence we have, right?
Absolutely. And as we've discussed, the most compelling evidence points towards misidentifications, hoaxes, or possibly those giant eels.
Right.
But even if Nessie turns out to be a mundane explanation, it doesn't diminish the power of the story itself.
That's a great point. The legend of Nessie has captured our imaginations for generations, inspiring countless books, films, and works of art.
Right.
It's a story that has become woven into the fabric of Scottish culture and will likely continue to fascinate us for years to come.
I agree. And perhaps that's the real magic of the Loch Ness Monster. It's not about finding a definitive answer, but about the mystery itself, the sense of wonder and possibility that it evokes.
Beautifully said. Well, it looks like we've reached the end of our Nessie deep dive.
Yeah,
It's been a pleasure exploring the depths of this enduring legend with you.
likewise.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of TESS'S Cryptids. We'll be back soon with another dive into the world of mysterious creatures. Until then, keep exploring. Stay curious and remember, there's always a chance that something extraordinary might be lurking just around the corner.